Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 1 of our story. If you like this what if story and want to see part 2, let me know in the comments below. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, check the description for more great content and my playlist. This story was posted by 𝗵𝗃 on Wattpad. Now let's start. I just found out you can't see the chapter covers if you don't load it twice. So please do, just swipe up one more time and load it again. Normally it will show after the second time. I put a lot of effort in them, so I felt really sad after finding out most of y'all haven't even seen them yet, so please do for a better reading experience. Warning, 50 Midoriya. Izuku looked up at 𝗕𝗁𝗁𝗵𝗃 eyes that watched him questioningly. He had totally phased out in panic when hearing his name. Are you okay? I just asked if you want to go bring the boss his food. Todoroki continued. Since you're like the only person he tolerates, 𝗬𝗂 sounded annoyed at the last part. Izuku gulped. 119 no. Oh yeah sure, Izuku said with a forced smile. He took the food off the counter and started walking to the boss's office. Tolerates? Do people think that? His heart sped up thinking about the things the boss had tried to do to him, but not in a good way. He was terrified and felt powerless. 50 He reached the door and let out a deep sigh before knocking. Come in. Izuku opened the door but didn't come in. He just put the food on the desk next to the door to not have to come close to the tall light blue-haired man. 190 He hears your food, Izuku stuttered, although he tried not to. He looked up at the red eyes and dry lips who were currently bent in an evil smirk. A frown formed on Shigaraki's face. 185 Aren't you coming over here? He said in a mad tone. It sounded like warning. Izuku knew he was going to get mad, but he didn't move. 39 I have to get back, Izuku said while internally yelling at himself for stuttering again. He was such an idiot. Why couldn't he just talk fluently whenever he was with the man? 38 Before Izuku could turn around, the man got up from his chair and approached the now shivering green-haired man. No need to leave so fast, he said while putting an arm around Izuku's shoulder. Izuku's shoulder automatically tensed up. The grinning man knew the other hated this. Izuku knew that's why he did it. 73 I should really go, Izuku said while trying to get out of Shigaraki's grip, but he only tightened it. The man's left hand went over to the other man's shivering thigh. Every muscle in Izuku's body was screaming for help. No. Stop, Izuku exclaimed while keeping his eyes shut. He pressed his teeth together. So hard it hurt, but he could only focus on the pale hand sliding up, finally reaching the hem of his pants. 200 What do you mean? Shigaraki whispered in Izuku's ear. I'm just touching you. 500 Izuku knew that was the only thing Shigaraki would do. The pale thin man had done this several times, but to Izuku's relief he never went further. Izuku usually ended up closing his eyes waiting for the light blue-haired man to stop, trying not to process anything, so that it was easier to act like it never happened later. 49 Thanks for the food, Aizu, Shigaraki said while looking right at the now shut green eyes. Izuku felt the hands leaving his body. Although it felt like they were still there, burning trough his skin, leaving marks that would never leave. 162 When he heard the footsteps going to the desk next to him, he finally opened his eyes. You can go now, Aizu. Guess I won't have to fire you, the man said, not looking at him. He silently sat back down and began focusing his eyes on the computer with a neutral face, like nothing had just happened. 117 Izuku felt his heart rate going back to normal. He turned around and walked with his head down in defeat back to his office. 9 This had been going on for a while now and Izuku felt powerless. He just wanted to get help, but he was too scared and mostly embarrassed to tell anyone. He knew this was wrong, but he didn't want people to worry, so just shut his mouth and acted like he was fine. Izuku had been doing this pretending game his whole life and could sometimes trick himself into believing it was true. 86 Yeah, that new bar, right? Said a woman outside in the hallway. Izuku looked up and could just see 𝗬𝗂 and some other colleagues pass through the corridor. 𝗬𝗂 made eye contact with Izuku for just a moment, but he quickly looked away and sped up his pace. 7 Izuku had been denying it, but deep down he knew his colleagues didn't like him. They hung out a lot after hours like they were about to. Izuku was never invited. He had asked himself why until he had heard someone talking about him and the boss in a nasty tone and found his answer quickly. 24 Izuku sighed as he finished up his work. He stood up and took his jacket ready to leave. He walked through the halls looking at his phone. 18:20, he was going to miss his train. 41, this day couldn't get any worse, he thought to himself. 58, he put on his headphones to listen to some music when he reached the train station. He dug his hands in his pockets while big clouds of air left his mouth. He was freezing. 26, when he had finally arrived home, he tried opening his front door, which was difficult due to the loss of feeling in his fingers. It was hard and took a while, but he managed. He walked in and looked sad at the empty home like he did ever since his mom had died. In the beginning he teared up every time he thought of her, but he had somehow become unable to cry. Like he didn't have to express his feelings anymore, because it was just easier to bottle them up. 139, I'm dirty, he thought to himself. And walked to the bathroom with a disgusted face, like he did almost every day, because of the events at work. He will try wiping at the spots Shigaraki had touched to stop the feeling of the hands still being there, but he would fail every day. Sometimes he ended up crying, although he didn't know for sure because of the water already streaming on his face. 69, after his shower he felt a little better and went to his room. He took some pajamas and put them on. He looked in the mirror next to his bed. He looked unhappy. He hated seeing his unhappy face, but couldn't get himself to smile. With another deep sigh he crawled into his bed and attempted to get some sleep. 9 Izuku's eyes shot open as he thought he heard footsteps outside his house. He choked on the air, scared of what it was, but he quickly convinced himself it was nothing. Shigaraki wouldn't come to his house, right? Izuku found a shiver running down his spine, establish his uncertainty. Izuku heard other footsteps, but to his disbelief the noises now sounded like they came from inside. He now sat up in his bed and put his head in his arms. His breathing was heavy and loud. 63, was he hearing that right, or was he just paranoid? 2, he shook his head. It couldn't be. He was just scared because of what happened today. 1, the sounds weren't real. 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 64, he kept repeating in his head, desperate to start believing it. He focused on his breathing and tried to calm down, but another thud from downstairs that sounded right under him had him place a hand on his mouth, now really panicking. 36, who was in his house? 65, footsteps echoed on the stairs to the first floor. Izuku's head went blank. What was he supposed to do? He placed the tip of his toe on the parquet, but after realizing that it was a stupid idea, he crawled back under the sheets and closed his eyes. He held his breath and pricked his ears, trying to hear the muffled sounds. They were voices. He was sure now, people were in his house and those people were coming to his room. The door of his room creaked open and Izuku tried shutting his eyes harder, trying to escape. The moment he was in right now. 36, is that him? A voice whispered, while footsteps resounded on the cold floor, almost reaching the bed. That's the idiot, another voice said, clearly not even trying to whisper. Izuku couldn't believe it. Was that who he thought it was? 37, Shaman, not so loud, was whispered again. You're going to wake him, you dash. 86, the shitty nerd isn't even asleep, the other voice growled, now even louder. Izuku was sure now, there was no doubt about it, this was. He couldn't finish that because he was hit in the back of the head. Everything around him started spinning, then was hazy to then finally fade to black. I just found out you can't see the chapter covers if you don't load it twice. So please do, just swipe up one more time and load it again. Normally it will show after the second time. I put a lot of effort in them, so I felt really sad after finding out. Most of y'all haven't even seen them yet, so please do for a better reading experience. Warning 44, when Izuku woke up his arm reached up at the paining bump on his head. When he tried opening his eyes he shut them immediately because of the light burning through his pupils. The room had a smell Izuku recognized, but he didn't know where from. It was a nice smell. He sat up on the soft mattress he felt underneath his bare feet. Had someone taken his shoes off? He tried to get his memories in order, but it was difficult with the light confusion running through his head. 2:10, he was obligated to open his eyes when he heard a door open. When he remembered what had happened, the unknown scared him more and he'd rather deal with the pain. His eyes met the appealing red ones that were not so unfamiliar to Izuku. The man was wearing a black suit with a black tie. A minute went by of the two of them just staring at each other. 𝗵𝗃 was Izuku finally able to stutter out. Is that you? Izuku started tearing up. He didn't really know why, but he knew he wasn't sad. It almost felt like he was crying from happiness for the first time as long as he could remember. He was happy to see his old friend again. Although it was a weird situation, he smiled at the sight of the blonde. That smile faded when the man's eyebrows made a deep frown at him and broke the silence. 53. Don't tell me you're still such a crybaby, Katsuki growled when rolling his eyes. Izuku looked down in defeat. He didn't know what to say. He looked around hastily, now that his eyes were finally adjusting to the light. He was on a large bed in a nice room. The room was spacey and had white with green touches on the walls. There was a lamp in the middle of the room providing bright orange light. Are you seriously ignoring me? Katsuki now almost yelled at Izuku. It made Izuku jump, and his eyes looked right in Katsuki's after they had been staring at the orange light. 25. Izuku stuttered even harder than before. The tears had stopped. He was tired. He just wanted to go home and get out of this situation. What was even going on? He couldn't focus because of the headache he was still having. Izuku looked down at the hands on his legs, noticing he had different clothes on. Had Katsuki changed his clothes? 45. Before Izuku could ask the blonde, he looked up surprised as a warm hand touched his leg, putting it to the side. The blonde was crawling his way to the green-haired boy who stared almost mesmerized at the scene in front of him. He could only think about how much Kaken reminded him of a wild animal crawling to his prey right now. When Katsuki finally reached Izuku's freckled nose with his, Izuku had finally realized with a big gulp that he was that prey. 60. You, shitty Deku, Katsuki said with a devilish smirk. Izuku couldn't take his eyes of the red ones now only inches away from him. 32. It had been years ago since he had heard that nickname. It made his heart skip a beat. It brought back a lot of memories. Happy ones he shared with the only friend he ever really had. 12-1. Oi Deku, this is a secret, okay? Katsuki said while widening his eyes. Izuku nodded determined. You can't tell anyone about our hideout. 7. I won't tell anyone, Izuku said while making a movement with his hands like he locked his mouth and threw the key away. Katsuki rolled his eyes. Deku was such an idiot. Not even your mom. Katsuki said with a doubting frown. Izuku widened his eyes at that. Not even his mom. That was going to be difficult but really exciting. It was their little secret, and that somehow made Izuku feel a little warm inside. 97. No, I promise, it's me and Kaken's secret. Izuku said while feeling his cheeks heat up. Was that because he was so excited? 1. Do you feel sick? Katsuki asked while getting of his butt and stumbling over to feel Izuku's face. You're hot? Katsuki said with a little concern in his voice. 41. No, it's not from that, Izuku said, blushing even harder now. Kaken took his hand of Izuku's freckled cheek and moved it to the little boy's ribs. Haha Kaken ha, Izuku burst out after Katsuki had started tickling. The little blonde knew he could always get a smile on Izuku's face when he did that, even when the little boy would be sad. 21. When Katsuki finally thought he had done enough, he took his hands off and looked at the boy whose eyes were glassy from laughing. Their faces were inches away from each other, and Izuku's face started unconsciously heating up again, while he smiled brightly at his best friend. Katsuki's lips then moved into a slight smile. 27-37. The way the blonde was looking at Izuku now was way different than when they were younger. It was now more a devilish grin than a genuine smile. It scared Izuku a little. Katsuki had clearly changed, and the green-haired man was pretty sure that wasn't going to be a good thing. 2. It was as if Katsuki locked their eyes together, because Izuku couldn't seem to look away from his crimson orbs. He looked at Katsuki's left eye and then switched to the right when he could no longer help it. That repeated itself for a whole minute when Katsuki finally had enough. 267. Stop doing that, shitty nerd. Katsuki growled while gritting his teeth at the green-haired man who now looked away. Katsuki sighed, and Izuku could feel the air on his face. Izuku looked back in front of him when Katsuki backed off and got off the bed. Izuku's shoulders that had tensed up at the intense gaze of the blonde finally relaxed again. His eyes, without him knowing, went from Katsuki's hair down to his toes. He couldn't help but realize that Kaken had changed physically too, and Izuku didn't mind that at all. Since when did Kaken become so muscular? Izuku could almost punch himself in the face for just thinking that. 46. Enjoying the view. Katsuki said when his face that had been in a frown made the devilish grin again. Izuku jumped, totally feeling embarrassed he was caught so obviously. He looked down at his legs and closed them again after they had been pushed open by the blonde. 97. Sorry, Izuku said, not making eye contact. He couldn't really think of a better answer. Should he ask about his clothes now? Izuku looked up and opened his mouth but only met empty air as the door shut. 26. He stood up from the bed, still feeling a little dizzy from the concussion. He opened the door to look for Kaken. He still had so many questions. Although he knew he wouldn't be able to ask them if the blonde approached him like that again. For his feet were freezing on the cold floor. The sweats and black shirt he was wearing were loose and definitely not his. Before he could start walking in the direction he thought Kaken might have gone, a pink woman looked him right in the eye and came his direction. 68. Izuku stood there as if glued to the floor. What was he supposed to do? Was she a friend of Bakugo's, and is that why she's in his house? Was he even in Kaken's house? Izuku just thought about all those questions when the woman simply took him by the arm and pulled him back into the room. Izuku looked at the woman while he was pushed in a green chair in the room. She had pink hair, with yellow horns coming out of it, that matched her body's color perfectly. 7. Who are you? Izuku said in a tiny voice while looking at her eyes that were black with orange pupils. 4. I'm Mina Ishido, she said while plucking at her nails. I'm a servant of Mr. Bakugo. She looked at Izuku and tilted her head to the side with a frown. By the way you're acting, he hasn't told you much, I assume. Izuku couldn't believe what he was hearing. Katsuki's servant. What was she talking about? He's not really good at that stuff. She rolled her eyes. What is he good at anyways? She said again, plucking at her nails. 30. There was a short silence, but she broke it again after she locked eyes again with Izuku. Plus, I'll show you around then, Midoriya, she said while already heading for the door. She knows my name. Izuku followed her uncomfortably, not really knowing what else to do. I just found out you can't see the chapter covers if you don't load it twice. So please do, just swipe up one more time and load it again. Normally it will show after the second time. I put a lot of effort in them, so I felt really sad after finding out. Most of y'all haven't even seen them yet, so please do for a better reading experience. Warnings. 25. The pink woman was wearing a black dress and jewelry that looked expensive. Izuku felt uncomfortable as he saw also other people they passed in the building wearing suits and formal wear. He looked down at the sweats. Why did Kaken put him in such clothes? People who passed looked at him and sometimes even nodded with a little smile. Do they know him? Were they also servants? Why would Kaken have so many? 26. Over there is the entry of the mansion, the woman said while pointing at a large gate surrounded by multiple fountains and flowers. Izuku saw through the glass of the windows. There were also many guards outside, and Izuku questioned why. Why are there so many guards? Izuku asked, and the woman looked away from the gate right in the jade eyes. It looked like her lips were making the slightest smile, but Izuku wasn't sure. They're for protecting us, she said, now sounding awake for the first time. If you set foot in the mafia world, you can never escape the dangers that come with it again. She turned around and kept walking in the hallway of glass, but Izuku looked away back to the guards. What was that? Mafia world. He had so many questions and walked, quickening his pace to catch up to Mina. 24. What do you mean? Izuku asked, alarmed when finally walking beside Mina. She looked at him with a look Izuku didn't really understand. Well, we serve Mr. Bakugo in exchange for protection, she said while looking back in front of her. In exchange for protection and Bakugo in the mafia. Things just became crazier and crazier, and Izuku didn't like it at all. 1. Why did he bring me here? Izuku asked after he had been pushing away the question, because he was too scared to ask. The pink woman now turned her black with orange eyes directly at Izuku and stopped walking. Wait, he didn't even tell you that, she said with a big frown on her face. 𝗕𝗏𝗧𝗏 said while his throat tightened and it became hard to breathe. Sorry, can't really tell you, she apologized while starting to walk again. I think he wants to be the one to tell you. Izuku's eyes followed the pink woman worried. He opened his mouth to ask more, but didn't trust his voice. So Izuku just caught up to the woman again and shut his mouth. 5. Here is the kitchen, Mina said while standing in front of a big white room full of servants who were cooking. But you won't be coming here often, our servants bring the food. 18. Oh okay, Izuku said a little doubting that. How long was he supposed to stay here? 6. Follow me to the gardens, the pink woman suggested, when she saw Izuku staring at the multiple people chopping ingredients in disbelief. The green-haired man looked lost in thought, so she just grabbed his arm and led him outside. 5. Izuku's eyes widened when he saw the appealing garden. It was huge. There were lots of fountains like there had been at the gate. The scent of flowers reached his nose and his lips molded unconsciously in a smile. He turned around to look at the building and seemed to only now notice how big the mansion was. It was white with some black touches and lots of glass. 18. Is this 𝗂𝗂𝗁's house? Izuku asked without being able to pull his eyes off of the magnificent building in front of him. Yes. There was a silence between them that was broken by Mina giggling. I'll leave you here, Izuku now turning his gaze away from the mansion and looked at Mina with a confused look. Why? Izuku murmured a little embarrassed as he realized how long he had been staring at the windows and balcons. I'll tell Mr. Bakugo you're here, the pink woman said walking up the steps back inside until she turned around and said, I think he'll come after he's finished some business. Izuku nodded and was left alone. 18. He wanted to ask 𝗂𝗂𝗁 why he was here and explain everything a little more because Izuku was so confused. Why did he break into his house? If he had just asked to come to his house to catch up, Izuku would have done that immediately. Or was that not what he was here for? He trusted 𝗂𝗂𝗁. They had been friends for years before they split up when going to high school. In the beginning they tried hanging out frequently, but after a month or two that had stopped. After their texting had died too, Izuku had fallen into a black hole. He had been missing 𝗂𝗂𝗁 ever since that day, so when he showed up today Izuku was actually really happy to see him back. Although the longer the day went on the more he realized that years change people. 9. He went over to a white bench and sat down. The headache seemed like it had stopped, but he still felt tired. After a few minutes of looking at the fountain and denying his falling eyelids, he finally gave in. Izuku laid down, put his head on his arms and closed his eyes. 10-1. Katsuki was irritated. He hadn't been able to get something from that stupid F. He went up the stairs and took his black gloves off. He threw them at a servant standing at the door of the basement. They landed on the servant's face and left some drops of 𝗵𝗃. Go. Katsuki yelled and the servant bowed before running off quickly. 37. The servants knew about Katsuki's bad temper and how fast he could explode. So they all just listened to him and did as he said. Are you worried, Mr. Bakugo? Another servant asked, while trying not to move a single limb. Katsuki glared daggers at him, his red eyes almost burning the servant's green ones. So sorry, sir, he stuttered now shivering. Of course I'm not, Katsuki said almost whispering, as if he was convincing himself. With that he shut the iron door to the basement and left the two shivering guards alone. 6-3. Katsuki walked down the stairs and saw Deku laying on one of the benches. Stupid nerd, he said to himself. He walked up to Izuku and sat on the tiny space that was free. He put his arms on the handrail and closed his eyes. He focused on the breathing of the smaller green man next to him. It was relaxed and it seemed to relax his too. 9. As soon as he dropped out of high school, he took his dad's place in the mafia. Since the day he and the green-haired man split up, he had never been able to find another friend like him. He was the only friend the blonde had ever had. 124. As a kid, he was always going around from school to school because of his bad behavior. He was always scolded for getting in fights with other kids. When he was about 5 years old, he entered Deku's school and most kids started hanging around him again. Although he hated every single one of them, he just let them be because it made him feel strong when people were under him. They followed his every move because of his obvious self-confidence. 17. On a certain day, Katsuki was wandering alone in the classroom after he had yelled at the 6 kids following him. He saw a little boy playing in the sandbox. He could only see the boy's green hair. He wanted to go to the playground when two other boys started yelling and pushing the little green-haired boy out of the sandbox. Katsuki let out a little chuckle as the green-haired boy left. He went up to the sandbox and wanted to enter, but then one of the boys started yelling. "We are playing here," one boy shouted. Katsuki's eyes narrowed at the stupid boy. Who the hell does he think he is? Go somewhere else. He continued yelling. You go somewhere else. Katsuki growled at the two boys and pushed one of the boys out of the sandbox. The boy's head hit the floor and he started crying. The other boy took the boy's hand and ran off. Katsuki smiled. No one is better than him. He started playing in the sand with one of the plastic shovels when he saw a small boy coming up to him in the corner of his eyes. What do you want? Katsuki said loud but ending in a whisper. He had never seen such an appealing boy. He had mesmerizing jade eyes and chubby freckled cheeks. When his crimson eyes burned the jade ones, the boy looked down quickly. 19. So sorry, I just wanted to say thank you, because of the other boys, Izuku mumbled. Plus Katsuki would never forget that moment. The moment he had met Izuku, the most appealing person he had ever seen. Oi Deku, wake up. Katsuki snarled, making Izuku jump and pushing himself back up from the position he had been laying in. Their faces again inches away from each other, but only for a second, because Izuku backed off quickly. 24. So sorry, I didn't know I had fallen asleep, Izuku lied, looking at the hands in his lap, not being able to look Katsuki in the eyes. There was a short silence between the two and Izuku's heart started racing. 53. Katsuki cupped Izuku's freckled cheek and turned his face to look him right in the eye. He waited for a moment and then whispered, "You liar," while burning Izuku's eyes again. Izuku choked on air. Since when had Katsuki become so intimidating? 75. When Katsuki finally liked the tint of deep red the freckled cheeks of the man had taken, he let go of Izuku's face. 18. Izuku didn't really know what to say. He looked away, embarrassed about the blush still painting his face. After that he turned around and asked the question he had been wanting to ask. Why did you take me here? Izuku asked, now looking at Katsuki with a determined glare. Although the act he had put up quickly faded when Katsuki's lips moved in the devilish grin again. 13. Still as dense as when we were younger, I see, Katsuki said while standing up and rolling his eyes. He fixed his tie and started walking. Wait, where was he going? And whose clothes are these? Izuku tried getting his attention again. Did you undress me? Izuku said, now almost yelling, because of the growing distance between the two. Hey! Izuku shouted before giving in and getting up to follow his old friend. Katsuki walked from corridor to corridor. When Izuku caught up with him, Katsuki grabbed Izuku's arm like a vice, making Izuku yelp. Kaken that who dash 29. Shut up, Katsuki said like he used to say multiple times when they were younger, but where he used to yell he now sounded relaxed and it kinda scared Izuku. He kept looking up at Katsuki, who hadn't looked at him since he started walking. People who passed greeted them, nodded and sometimes even bowed. Izuku looked at them in disbelief. Why do they keep doing that? 7. When Katsuki reached the door of Izuku's room, he opened it, threw Izuku inside and closed it shut. Izuku stood there not knowing what was about to happen. Kaken had always been unpredictable, but this Kaken was different. He felt a tremble in his fingers realizing what he was feeling. For he was scared of Katsuki. 177. Izuku tried opening his mouth but no words came out. It was Kaken who eventually broke the silence. I'm going to bring someone to dress you. What, to dress him? Katsuki turned around to the door. For, what do you mean? Izuku asked while reaching a hand out to grab Katsuki's shoulder. Before he could make Katsuki stop, leaving the blonde slapped his hand away. It wasn't an angry slap, more like he had started panicking and wanted to be in control. Izuku took his hand back and stared at it for a moment, like he could read answers to Katsuki's weird behavior on there. 27. We're having dinner tonight. I want you to look presentable, Katsuki said while still facing the door. Izuku looked down at his clothes right now. Katsuki had a point, he did look miserable and he hadn't showered yet. Izuku sighed loudly and looked down in defeat. Katsuki knew exactly what Izuku looked like right now even though he wasn't even looking. He looked perfect like he always did. although the blonde would never admit that to the green-haired man. With that thought, Katsuki opened the door and left. 49-2. Only 5 minutes later, a woman had come into his room. After she had bowed and greeted Izuku formally, she continued to measure up Izuku and getting him some clothes. While the woman did all that, she made small talk while wiggling her black spiky ponytail. Izuku was actually really embarrassed about undressing and trying clothes on, but the woman had a warming smile on her face that somehow put him at ease. After she had asked him many questions, he decided he wanted to ask something too. 144, what's your name? Izuku asked with genuine interest. She looked up for a moment with a rather shocked face. 5, my name is Momo Yaoyorozu, she said with the smile returning. But please just call me Momo. She finished measuring Izuku's waist and gave some clothes to him. Here, this will do for now, Momo said, turning to the door. Next time I'll have some clothes made to perfectly fit you. 40 what? Like made to measures? Izuku said, backing up and waving his hands in front of him. You don't have to do that, too. Mr. Bakugo asked me to accentuate your feminine features more. She turned around, still smiling. Feminine features? What does he mean? I'll see you tomorrow with a dress, Midoriya. A dress. Izuku had never put on a dress before. When Momo started leaving, he opened his mouth. 139, Momo. She turned around again and looked questioningly. Please call me Izuku, he said, trying to return the smile she had been having the entire time. Sure. She bowed again and left. Izuku was left in his boxers in the room again. He put on the clothes Momo had given him. It was a mild pink suit. He looked at black shoes on the ground. 11, I'll tell her not to bow anymore next time. He thought to himself. It had taken pretty long to measure with Momo and shower, way longer than he thought it would take. He assumed it was time to go to diner. 19, as if on cue, the door to his room opened again and it revealed Bakugo in a black suit but with a pink tie matching Izuku's suit. Izuku hated himself for choking on air again as he was dumbfounded at how good Kaken looked. 69, are you gonna keep staring like a creep or are you coming to eat? Katsuki said with a condescending smirk. It was almost like his old friend was making a joke. Maybe Kaken hadn't changed as much as Izuku thought. 52, yeah, I'm coming, Izuku stuttered, walking up to Kaken, but Izuku changed his mind when he reached the dining room. 26, there was a long brown table filled with people who didn't exactly look friendly. Izuku's heart stopped when he noticed the guns next to almost every person who sat down at the table. Some guards nodded at them as Katsuki put his arm around Izuku's waist, pulling him closer. Izuku yelped but quickly shut his mouth and widened his eyes when he saw everyone at the table looking at them. 9, hello, Mr. Pooh, grumbled a man with gray hair and brown eyes. His voice sounded crusty, clearly a heavy smoker. He then stood up and shook hands with Bakugo, who glared at him, returning the rather angry look everyone seemed to have. Izuku stared at the fangs the man had, coming out of his mouth. 40, good evening, Mr. Khan, Katsuki answered and greeted the others with a nod. The green-haired man felt really uncomfortable while he was led to his spot at the table by Kaken. He pulled Izuku's chair backwards. And Izuku sat down, trying not to panic because of the tension in the room. He swore in that moment you could cut it with a knife. 123, I heard you didn't get anything out of that guy. Khan said with a serious look, while Katsuki sat down and put his gun on the table like the others. Izuku looked at his friend in disbelief. Had Kaken carried around a gun this whole time? 24, no matter what I try he keeps his mouth shut, Katsuki answered while tapping on the table with his fingers. Have you tried it? Another man now called out in a desperate tone. Katsuki angrily interrupted him, clearly annoyed about the situation they were talking about. Yes, I've stabbed him, he yelled out when he hit the table with his fist. He was trembling but not from angst. Izuku knew the anger Katsuki could feel and how he would try to control it. I should have just killed him, he said, now more silent as if he was talking to himself. 58, Izuku's eyes widened. Torturing someone. Killing someone. What was Kaken talking about? He tried to put the pieces together while looking at the trembling hand next to him. Kaken was losing it, he was trying to hold it in, but at this rate Izuku knew he would explode. 26. The green man put one of his freckled hands on Kaken's without really thinking about it. It happened unconsciously and he immediately regretted it. Just as he wanted to take his hand away, Kaken visibly relaxed. The muscles in his shoulders unclenched and the veins in his neck disappeared. 83. Izuku looked up and then realized that everyone's attention was on him. All the men at the table were looking at him with unreadable glares. They looked curious but mostly angry. 59. Who's that Mr. Baku? Another man asked who hadn't said a word since they had come in. Izuku's eyebrows made a frown. He was sitting right here. He blinked a few times, really confused if he should answer, because Kaken seemed like he wasn't going to. Izuku poured out of his mouth but couldn't seem to keep going. Luckily Katsuki jumped him. 7. He's Midoriya Izuku, Katsuki said with a grin, clearly having lost a lot of his anger. My fiancé. Izuku hadn't been able to bring himself to talk when everyone was looking at him at the table, but deep down he was panicking. What was Kaken talking about? After they had left the dinner, he had pulled Kaken to his room while putting up a fake smile. The last thing he wanted was for the men to start questioning things and staying any longer. 3. What do you mean fiancé? Izuku shouted angry. Kaken hadn't explained him anything. He just wanted Kaken to tell him this was all a joke, but instead Katsuki was just standing there, his face probably with the least expression he had ever had. It looked like he wasn't even listening. Kaken, are you even listening? Izuku now said, fists clenched as he started tearing up. He wanted answers from the blonde. He knew he would probably regret asking later. 21. What do you want me to say? Katsuki said, shrugging, still with the expressionless face. It can't really be any more clear, he said with the devilish grin again making its way on his face. We're getting married, he said in a weird tone while now approaching Izuku. 204. With every step Katsuki took, Izuku took another one back. He kept backing away from the blonde until he felt his legs reaching the bed. He looked behind him and back at the red orbs. The jade eyes Katsuki had always admired were glassy as a tear threatened to roll over the shivering man's freckled cheek. You're so pretty, Katsuki thought, but knew he'd never say that out loud. 52. I don't want to, Izuku stuttered out, not knowing he was talking about the marriage or the hand moving down his back. A tear started its way down his cheek. 56. I think I can change that, Katsuki said, not backing his hand away. He felt the hem of Izuku's pants and then boxers. 52. No, please, Izuku cried out. He tried taking the hand away but his body wouldn't move. Not again, Izuku whispered, closing his eyes shut. Now tears were streaming down his face. 123. Katsuki's hand hesitated at that and then he took it off the shivering Izuku. He tried looking at the appealing jade orbs, but the other had them still shut. He cupped one of the freckled cheeks, making Izuku jump in surprise and open his eyes. Izuku looked at the condescending smirk that had faded into a concerned frown. 40. Juice leave, Izuku hiccuped, wanting to forget everything that had just happened. To his surprise, Katsuki seemed to listen. The blonde pressed his lips on Izuku's forehead and let go of his cheek. After the door had shut, Izuku wiped away his tears. He shouldn't be so pathetic, he thought to himself. He could always hold back his tears when he touched him, so why was it different now? 32-12, Bakugu, Katsuki heard while putting down his drink. He had been lost in thought at the bar. It all seemed so simple, why did Deku have to make things so difficult? He ignored the redhead, who approached him anyway. I heard about Deku man, 20, don't call him that shitty hair, Katsuki said, annoyed while he kept staring at the almost empty bottle of tequila in front of him. 1. Wait, why are you here drinking? Kirishima said with a confused frown. I thought Midoriya was staying here. He is, Katsuki said and sipped from his drink again after a deep sigh. He doesn't want to sleep together tonight. 32. That's weird, I thought you guys were way more comfortable with each other, Kirishima said, trying to take away the already drunk blonde's drink. Since y'all are getting married and all. 16. I'll make him love me, Katsuki said while slapping Kirishima's hand away angrily. I'll wait, however long it takes. 135. Wow, I didn't know you had such a soft spot for that guy, Kirishima said after sitting down next to the blonde. 7. I don't, Katsuki yelled while turning his hate aggressively to Kirishima. When the redhead didn't seem to feel threatened at all, the blonde turned back to his original position. He took the last sip of tequila and said in a doubting tone, "I don't, 23, I was scared for a minute you really didn't have any emotions, but guess I was wrong," Kirishima said while pouring a glass himself. When he saw the blonde staring at his own glass angrily, he continued, "Well, I'm happy I was wrong," trying to make sense to Kaken. 2. Shut your demon face shitty hair, the blonde snarled, clearly having lost his composure. "I don't have a soft spot for that stupid nerd." 15. Whatever you say, Baku bro, Kirishima teased while sipping his drink. Katsuki took out his gun. "Wow bro, calm down, I was just teasing," Kirishima said while waving his hands in front of him. Although he wasn't afraid. His friend would never hurt him. He just knew he had gone too far, ignoring the clear signs Bakugo had been giving him. 60. Katsuki stood up and started walking out of the room. He felt dizzy due to the alcohol he had been drinking, but managed. He had been drinking regularly since the incident involving the man in the basement, so he had a pretty high tolerance against it. 7. Hey, don't leave now bro, Kirishima yelled after him. "All I'm saying is that you're different when things involve high dash." His words were cut off by the loud bang of the door shutting, leaving Kirishima confused to drink alone at the bar. 6. Different with him. Katsuki thought angrily to himself, soft spot. What the F does that stupid shitty hair think he's talking about? Katsuki kicked a table in the hallway in anger. An expensive vase fell on the ground. Although Katsuki didn't notice his rage. He kept walking further to end up at Izuku's room. Had he walked over here unconsciously? He thought to himself. With the alcohol and rage flowing through his body, he opened the door without realizing. He entered the room to find Izuku sitting up on the bed hastily. 24. Kaken, what are you doing here? Izuku stuttered, while pulling the sheets higher to cover up his bare chest. 19. Kaken didn't answer. Instead he crawled onto the bed with an evil smirk. Izuku's eyes started watering. He was scared of what Kaken might try to do to him as he noticed that the blonde was drunk. Katsuki put his muscular arms around Izuku's frail figure and laid down next to him. It was hard to breathe. The blonde's arms felt like vices holding Izuku tight. 16. "Let go of me," Izuku mumbled while wiggling. He was trying to move out of the blonde's grip when he suddenly heard a light snore behind him. Was Kaken sleeping? 62. He tried looking at him but could only see a part of the blonde's face. He looked so peaceful and almost cute. The opposite of what Kaken had tended to be today. He turned back to face the nightstand and closed his eyes after he realized he wouldn't be able to get out of the arms without waking Kaken up. As the blonde had fallen asleep, his grip had loosened and Izuku felt safe in his friend's arms as he leaned his face on Katsuki's arm. If he just acted like nothing had happened, then maybe everything would be just fine. With that thought, he fell asleep and slept better than he had in years. 96-3. Deku, it's going to be fine. Katsuki tried to reassure Izuku while placing his hand on the green-haired boy's shoulder. "I don't want you to leave me," Izuku said with a trembling voice. "I'm going to be so lonely," he said, looking down at his feet with a tiny voice. He couldn't stop thinking about the fact he and his only friend weren't going to be in the same classes anymore. 10. "It doesn't mean we can't keep seeing each other, nerd," Katsuki said while wiping a rolling tear off of Deku's freckled cheek. "No need to cry," he said while taking Izuku's chin gently and making the smaller boy look at him. He tried to smile, but it was for some reason really difficult. 11. "But," Izuku's voice didn't seem to be able to finish that sentence. There was a short silence when Katsuki wiped away another tear. Izuku's lip kept wobbling. He eventually tried to put his arms around Kaken's neck, but needed the blonde to lift him up a bit. Izuku placed his face in the crook of the taller boy's neck. Kaken would never admit it, but in that moment a tear rolled down his own cheek as he grit his teeth. He quickly wiped it away on Izuku's shoulder. He was going to miss his green-haired friend. A lot. "Answer my questions or you die," Katsuki snarled, echoing in the basement. Katsuki had a knife at the man's throat. 7. The man wore all black and seemed to only have a mouth. He was smiling like a maniac. "Oh Katsuki, you know I won't tell you anything," he chuckled. "So go ahead." The man went closer to the knife. "Kill me." 30. Katsuki's eye twitched from irritation. This man wasn't going to tell him anything. He had been asking where his other men were for almost a year now, and it seemed like he kept his mouth shut even with no food and torture. He just couldn't kill him for her sake. He pulled the knife away from the man's neck. 29, I know you won't kill me, the man now said with a sadistic smirk. You little boys still have hope. 10, shut up. Katsuki yelled from the top of his lungs. He wanted the man to stop talking. All he did was bring back memories he'd rather forget. Memories he couldn't handle without exploding of anger. And to do that with a smile like the lunatic had in front of him, it made his blood boil. I've had enough of your bullshit today, Katsuki said, now calmer, realizing people could probably hear him through the whole building, and left. 3 When Izuku had woken up, the blonde's arms were gone. He felt a squeeze in his chest, but recovered fast, wanting to punch himself in the face. He shouldn't be thinking like that, not after what the blonde had done. 11 Izuku felt wide awake for the first time in years. He realized he had slept better than ever. At home he would always keep thinking about Shigaraki's hands scrubbing against his own skin. Oh no, he thought to himself. With everything going on with Kaken, he had totally forgotten about work. He hopped out of the bed and took a shower in his bathroom. 13 Today he was going to ask Kaken if he could go to work, he thought while rubbing in some shampoo. No, what was he thinking? He thought angrily to himself, I don't need Kaken's permission, I'm going to work tomorrow. When he had washed out all the shampoo, he closed his eyes and thought, I'll ask Kaken just to be sure. 75 Izuku startled when he heard his door open. Was Kaken here? He ran out of the shower and wrapped a towel around his body quickly, not wanting to be bare in case the blonde decided to come in. He opened the bathroom door just enough to put his head through. To his relief, his eyes met gray ones. The dress is ready, you're going to look so pretty. Momo yelled out, excited. Izuku sighed out in relief. He was happy it wasn't the blonde. He had wanted to give Kaken a chance, because they had always been best friends and he loved him deeply, but after what had happened he doubted that. Could he trust him? He wanted to be close to Kaken like they had been at night, but then at the same time he was terrified when thinking it was him who was standing outside of the bathroom. Aren't you excited? Momo exclaimed, waking Izuku out of his thoughts. 3 I don't know, he said, looking at the ground embarrassed after he had spotted the green with white dress in Momo's hands. When he looked back up he saw Momo was not wearing the smile she used to and quickly said, but the dress is appealing, while his cheeks started heating up. 21 After Momo had helped him in the dress, he looked at himself in the mirror on the green wall. The dress looked pretty. Really pretty. Momo took the straps in the back of the dress. Tell me when it's too tight, it still has to be comfortable, she said while putting a finger in the air and started pulling them. When she thought it was tight enough she said, so, this is more than enough, while admiring her work in the mirror. 9 Wow, Izuku said, not really having words at that moment. He looked pretty. Really pretty. 32 Wait. Momo started panicking. Why are you crying? She said, putting a hand his shoulder and coming in the frame of the mirror while locking eyes with Izuku. Izuku's throat tightened. He breathed out, I feel so pretty, he said in a trembling voice while turning around to get a better look on the back as a tear made its way down his face. 218 Momo also felt tears building up in her eyes, but tried holding them back. He did look pretty, really pretty. 1 Katsuki was walking through the hallways angrily when a servant ran up to him. Sorry for interrupting, sir. Katsuki rolled his eyes at the servant who had clearly noticed the blonde was angry. Then why do you do it, huh? Katsuki yelled in his face. The servant opens his eyes again after shutting them. 26 I thought you would want to know, sir, he said, bowing as he realized he had forgotten due to his panic. The vase of your mother's. Katsuki's eyes widened in disbelief. It broke. The servant looked up scared at the blonde who was realizing someone had shattered the vase. The servant was right. The blonde was realizing someone had shattered it, but to his disbelief it had been him. We don't know who shattered it, but it wasn't him. 7 Shut your din face, Katsuki growled while anger was building inside him. 29 He started walking towards the place the vase had been standing, next to Izuku's room. The vase had been standing there since his parents had left for unfinished business in Europe. The 16-year-old boy had never dared to admit it, but he placed it in front of his room for a reason he couldn't really understand back then. It just felt right. When Deku was about to stay, Katsuki had told the servants he was going to change rooms so Deku could sleep in his. 5. The fact that he was the person who had shattered it, shattered his heart. He felt tears building up in his eyes as he looked at the pieces of the vase. His sight went blurry as he realized he didn't do tears and pushed them back. The pain was replaced easily with anger, which Katsuki found way easier to deal with. 11. Clean this 𝗕𝗍, he snarled at the servant who was still shivering behind him, and with that he stormed into Deku's room. It was all the nerd's fault. After all, 330-1 Izuku found himself sitting at the table he was led to by Momo. The room was a lot like a restaurant, although he was there alone. He had taken place at a white table with food already served on it. It smelled amazing and Izuku found his stomach growling. She bowed and Izuku quickly said, "Please, don't bow Momo," like he had promised himself. "It's not necessary," he said while smiling at her shocked face. "Are you sure?" she asked him, a bit taken back. The green-haired man was going to be the bride of Mafia head after all. She doubted for a moment. He realized that. Izuku nodded. He was sure. "Okay then," she said, now returning the smile. 16. "Hey man, you must be Deku," a redhead yelled across from the room and approaching his table. Izuku's shoulders tensed up because of the stranger. He had never seen him before. Momo seemed to be called to the kitchen and left. Izuku looked at her leaving and panicked. She was the only person he could trust here. "Oh wait, yeah, sorry," the redhead continued after Izuku hadn't answered. "I mean Mr. Midoriya, 7, Mr. Midoriya." Izuku stuttered. I mean, he cleared his throat trying to recover from that. "What's your name?" 3. "Oh hi, I'm Kirishima, a friend of Boo," the redhead said while taking place across from Izuku. He seemed nice, but Izuku didn't want to jump to conclusions yet. "Although Bakubro will never call me that," he said with a loud chuckle. Izuku chuckled. He could see what the redhead might mean. "Hi, I'm Izuku. It's nice to meet you," Izuku said before offering a hand. Kirishima shook gratefully. 4. "So you've met him too, huh?" yelled another voice from the entry of the restaurant. It was the pink lady, Mina, who had shown him around on his first day. She had acted pretty nice, so if Kirishima was a friend of hers, he'd probably be nice too, right? "Yeah babe," the redhead said before kissing her on the lips when she joined them at the table. 125. So more than a friend, Izuku thought while taking a bite out of his pancake. The two kept talking, asked Izuku a few questions too, and sometimes even made him press down a chuckle. So they were Kaken's friends. Izuku felt a little jealousy rise up his chest, but pushed it down quickly. Obviously he had made friends in the years Izuku had been gone, he thought when he sadly realized he had not. 6. When he had finished his breakfast, Momo led him back to his room, because he still didn't know which way it was. Then the black-haired woman showed him the jacuzzi on the balcony. He hadn't noticed since his stay, so he could keep himself busy until Mr. Katsuki would show up. "Deku, you demon nerd," Katsuki growled while opening the door to Izuku's room. He stormed in and looked left and right, realizing the bedroom was empty. His anger kept building up. He opened the door to the balcony to see Deku leaning on the railing. 113. "Oh hi Kaken," Izuku said, smiling wide. He felt amazing this morning. He had slept well, made some new friends and felt pretty in his new clothes. "Momo said I could use the jacuzzi, but I don't think she realized I don't have any swimwear," he said with the same smile while rubbing the back of his head. 3. Katsuki wasn't listening. The moment Izuku had turned around, he couldn't take his eyes off his body. 𝗕𝗫 had done a good job. A real good job. Izuku looked better than perfect, if that was even possible, but the green-haired man made it seem possible so easily. The blonde blinked a few more times. 27. Kaken. Izuku asked, "Oh right, the dress," he said while looking at his feet. Did Kaken think it was ugly? Izuku couldn't look at the blonde. "You look magnificent," Katsuki sighed out, but when he realized what he had said, he quickly continued, "For you of course," while rubbing his arm. Izuku chuckled and came up to the blonde, cupping his cheek before impersonating Katsuki. 10. You liar. 98. Izuku didn't know for sure, but he thought he could see a slight blush on Katsuki's cheeks. He let go of his cheek, realizing he was definitely beating the blonde at that. When Katsuki saw Izuku looking away, hiding his blush, he pulled his face softly back to his. Their lips were inches away from each other, But Izuku didn't back off. Izuku tried narrowing the gap between the two, but hesitated. Katsuki saw his chance and kissed Izuku deeply. Izuku melted into the kiss and put his arms around Katsuki's neck. When Katsuki broke the kiss, Izuku gasped for air. His eyes widened, realizing the taller man was carrying him back inside. 124 Katsuki threw Izuku on the bed and pinned him down to the mattress. Izuku looked at the blonde above him and felt the urge to kiss him again grow. He tilted his head up trying to reach Kaken, but the blonde pushed him back down by his neck. Izuku, startled but was cut off by Katsuki. 65, let's get you out of this dress, he said with a smirk. It wasn't the evil one Izuku had seen so many times lately, but more leaning to the condescending one Izuku had followed for years. He let Kaken's arms lead him while taking off his green piece of clothing. Katsuki threw it to the side while looking at the now almost completely naked Izuku. 90 Katsuki couldn't believe how appealing Izuku looked right now, his body so frail and soft, all at his mercy. It spiked his arousal thinking at all the things he wanted to do to the green-haired man. He pushed his leg against Izuku's PP and started kissing the other man's neck. 196 Izuku tried to hold in moans, but they all slipped out of his mouth eventually. Kaken. The moans of the man under him seemed to encourage Katsuki, and he started leaving bite marks on the boy's neck, then shoulders and collarbone. Kaken, that hurts, Izuku tried to bring out, but was cut off by some more moans. Katsuki then looked Izuku in the eyes, seeing the pleasure he was giving the man on his face. 34 He kissed Izuku again and bit his lip for entrance. He put his tongue in, exploring Izuku's mouth. When he broke the kiss, Izuku started touching his chest. The blonde took the top of his suit off and threw it against the same wall, letting it land on top of the earlier thrown dress. 73 Izuku's eyes widened. He had secretly fantasized about Katsuki, but the blonde seemed to beat all the images he had had in his mind. He gasped, looking up and down like he was checking if what he was seeing was real. 10. Enjoying the view, Katsuki said while smirking again. Izuku blushed as he realized he really was. The blonde pinched Izuku's nipples again, clearly waking him up out of his thoughts. Izuku yelped and again, while pure pleasure ran through his nerves. 87 Kaken then stopped licking his chest and looked at the jade eyes. He looked down as he seemed to approve of the amount of hickeys and bite marks he had left on the smaller man. He looked happy at the contrast of dark-colored spots on Izuku's pale skin. He then kissed his way to Izuku's boxers and nibbled at the hem with his teeth. 80 Izuku shot up at that and tilted his head looking at the blonde. The blonde's crimson eyes seemed to lose against the color Izuku's face had taken. Katsuki smirked sadistically. He was enjoying this, way more than he had ever imagined he would. 26 He pulled at Izuku's boxers as Izuku seemed to hesitate, they slipped away. Izuku closed his eyes, not being able to look at the blonde. Although his eyes were closed, he could still feel the others on his member. Izuku's eyes popped back open when a shot of pleasure raced through his body, making him arch his back. Katsuki, who had only started licking the tip of Izuku's length, grinned as he saw the immense effect it had on the smaller boy. Katsuki started slowly bobbing his head up and down, and Izuku slapped his hand on his mouth, clenching his teeth together while closing his eyes as they rolled back. This felt so good. 117 Then suddenly Katsuki stopped and Izuku looked at him, slightly irritated at the loss of pleasure. "Look at me," Katsuki said with an angry face. Izuku didn't know what he had to say, but didn't need to when Katsuki brought his tongue back at the tip of Izuku's pages. When the blonde started bobbing again on Izuku's PP, he locked eyes with him and Izuku tried to do the same, but was taken back by a few eye rolls or moans. He felt his nerves spike when almost reaching his crescendo. Katsuki felt Izuku twitch in his mouth and then felt the warm liquid enter his throat before he swallowed. 121 Katsuki crawled back closer to Izuku when he saw the smaller boy's afterglow expression. He had his back arched, fists clenched in the sheets, mouth open and eyes rolled in his head. Katsuki could feel arousal tensing up in his veins as he just noticed how his own PP had began to harden. 10 He grabbed Izuku's hips and yanked him closer to him. That seemed to bring the other man back to reality. "Kaken, what are you doing?" Izuku said with a trembling voice. Katsuki didn't answer. He spit on Izuku's entrance, and that seemed to give the green-haired boy his answer. Kaken, I don't know dash. Izuku was cut off by a finger entering him. Izuku screamed out. He didn't like that at all, but Kaken didn't seem to listen. 189 Katsuki was driven by lust and put in another while putting his other hand rough on Izuku's face. Izuku screamed again. He arched his back, not from pleasure but from pain. Izuku tried moving his hips out of the blonde's grip, but without success. Katsuki started moving the fingers in a 𝗧𝗂𝗁 motion while feeling his pee harden even more. 3. Loosen up Deku, Katsuki growled, irritated in a low tone, like he was getting impatient. You're going to make it hurt? Katsuki said while continuing the motions. Izuku opened his mouth, ready to bite the hand roughly placed on his face, when a sudden peak of pleasure shot through his body, making him arch his back and his eyes roll in his head again. 80. Izuku-𝗵𝗵𝗲. Katsuki smirked as he memorized the place deep inside Izuku and kept rubbing it with his 2 fingers. Kaken, Izuku-𝗵𝗲 while clenching his fists in the sheets again. Katsuki's devilish grin made its way on his face when he saw Izuku loosening up and entered a 3rd finger. Izuku kept while Katsuki abused the spot inside him. 83. Then the blonde revealed his rather big pee out of his pants. He left on. Izuku, who had looked up at the loss of the fingers, gasped when he saw it. That was never going to fit in him, but that didn't seem to stop Katsuki, who looked back at Izuku's entrance and pushed his tip against it. Kaken, I don't dash. Izuku was again cut off by Katsuki, who thrusted hard inside him. Izuku yelled out, but quickly rolled his eyes back as he felt the spot inside him being brushed. 40. F you're tight 𝗬𝗏, Katsuki groaned out and slowly started thrusting. The pain combined with the pleasure rushing through his nerves had tears welling up in Izuku's eyes. 114. Ah yes. Izuku-𝗵𝗲 when he was adjusting to the full feeling. Katsuki looked at the tearing Izuku while thrusting slowly. More Kaken, Izuku then said, and Katsuki's patience had just ran out. 86 more. Katsuki said with a sadistic smile, and Izuku immediately regretted what he had said, when Katsuki started thrusting tenfold inside Izuku. Izuku screamed and tears started running down his face. Katsuki's eyes rolled back for a moment and then were glaring back at Izuku. He molded Izuku's lips with his and bit again, asking for entrance that was hardly denied. He then pinched one of the man's nipples, making the man numb like a maniac, and giving what he asked for. Katsuki kept thrusting while kissing Izuku roughly and thereafter biting and sucking his neck. 78. Then Katsuki grabbed Izuku's hips and thrusted even harder into the smaller boy, clearly about to finish. Izuku started crying out and louder as he felt he was about to too. Izuku practically screamed as he came when he felt his muscles relax and his eyes roll back. White liquid shot up, painting his chest and Katsuki's. Then Katsuki seemed to lose all rhythm, blindly seeking his pleasure to also hit home with a big groan and filling Deku up. 13. You took my pee so well 𝗬𝗏. Izuku was panting and still wearing his afterglow expression. Katsuki fell down next to him, also panting and still rolling his eyes back, which made Izuku flinch and realize what had happened. He felt dirty with all the cum on his chest and also, but thanks to the blonde next to him, who was wrapping his arms around Izuku. 18. I'm going to shower, Izuku stuttered while trying to get out of Katsuki's grip. Although it was eventually thanks to the blonde, who let him go, he could escape. Voodoo, he said with a condescending smirk. Make sure to take my cum out of your butt, he continued before turning around on the bed and trying to sleep. Katsuki had woken up early and was tired. He had been so angry and then so corny, a roller coaster of emotions. He felt like he deserved a little nap. 85. Izuku got in the shower and blinked, still not able to comprehend what had happened. Were they a couple now? Or was Kaken just doing that for fun? Did Kaken do that all the time? He hadn't seen Kaken in so long, and Izuku missed the communication Kaken clearly didn't want to give. 23. He took a shampoo bottle and started on his hair. When he was all ready, the pain in his sore but reminded him of what Kaken had said. Right? Izuku said with a big sigh and put his finger on his entrance. Wow, Izuku whined out, but tried to hold it in knowing Katsuki was in the room beside him. He pushed a finger inside while pushing his teeth together at the pain. With a second finger in, he started taking the cum out, but it just kept coming. Izuku winced and whined, then took his fingers away when finally thinking he got it all out. 122 When he put his head through the door, he saw an empty bed. Katsuki had probably become impatient and gone to his own room to shower, Izuku thought. He wasn't as dirty as Izuku had been after all. Izuku's smile returned on his face as he saw the green dress. He pulled his arms through the sleeves and tried to fix the straps himself. It was difficult and took a while, but he managed. I still need to tell him about work, Izuku said to himself while heading to the door of his room. 34-3 After Katsuki had taken a shower in the room he now slept in, he put on one of his suits, and was happy to pick up his green tie and put it on. He had asked 𝗕𝗓𝗏 to make it when he told her about the dress. His new room didn't have a balcony with a jacuzzi or the big bathroom like Izuku's. It had the same colors, but had stairs that led to a courtyard like some other rooms in the mansion. 29 He smiled at his reflection looking at the jade tie. For some reason the color always made him happy. It's because it makes you think of Izuku, a familiar voice in his head said. The corners of his mouth became heavier and his eyes watery. He looked at his reflection in disgust and he pushed them all back. He put the devilish grin, that seemed easier to make, on his face. He was going to show off Deku to everyone tonight. 57 𝗕𝗓𝗏 had been begging him for weeks now to go to a new club with him and Raccoon Eyes. He had been saying no for weeks too, but when the redhead's girlfriend had whispered something in 𝗕𝗓𝗏's ear, he had told Katsuki he could bring Deku with and that it would be super fun. Katsuki didn't think that he was going to be right, but liked the thought of showing off with Deku, so agreed to go. Although he would never admit to anyone that that was the real reason. 14 Hey man, was yelled from the entrance of the room. Kirishima was the only person Katsuki could seem to tolerate in his room. Other people didn't dare to come near him when he was dressing, eating, or swimming. The redhead just didn't ask a lot of questions and above all didn't look into things. I met Deku today, Kirishima said and quickly corrected himself. I mean Izuku, with an awkward smile. He didn't want a PSS of the blonde after he had just agreed to go out with him for the first time in months. Don't call him that either, Katsuki snarled while fixing his tie for the third time, really wanting it to look perfect. But he told me himself the dash, Kirishima began, but was quickly interrupted by a yelling Katsuki clenching his fists. You do as I tell you, Katsuki snarled. Don't forget that 𝗕𝗓𝗏, he continued in a nasty tone, but all Kirishima did was blink. 10 All right, calm down man, Kirishima's favorite sentence to use against Bakugo's temper. Although it hadn't worked a single time since he started using it. You were right, he's really shy, Kirishima said while putting a finger on his chin. Katsuki smirked at that. He remembered what had happened this day and felt a spike of arousal hit his skin. You look pretty happy, Kirishima noticed. Did something good happen to you? Kirishima asked while punching his friend playful in the shoulder. Katsuki flinched at that. 10 Don't do that 𝗕𝗓𝗏, Katsuki said with a little panic in his voice. Then let the sadistic smile on his face return. I feel like I'm gonna have a lot of fun tonight, Katsuki said while looking back in the mirror. 4 I think so too man, Kirishima said while smiling at the blonde. Although Katsuki knew his red-haired friend was thinking about something completely different than him. 72-3 Izuku held onto Katsuki's arm while entering the club. Momo had given him another dress and he couldn't help but feel a little exposed. The dress had a deep opening in the back and its skirt was really short. It was the same color as his other dress had been, he had noticed happy. He looked up at the confident blonde and noticed the matching tie. He looked away blushing. If someone had told him a year ago he was going to be holding Kaken like this, the green-haired man would have declared him crazy, but here he was and couldn't help but smile brightly. 46 Kaken had promised him they wouldn't stay long, because of the other boys' work tomorrow and for some reason he trusted the blonde. If that was a good or not, Izuku didn't really know. 2 They passed through the doors and walked some stairs to see Kirishima and Mina waiting for them. Izuku smiled at them. He had talked with them during lunch and diner too and thought he could finally proudly say he had made some new friends. Hi Izuku. The pink woman yelled through the loud music and let go of the redhead to run towards them. Mr. Bakugo is finally hanging out with us and it's all thanks to you, she exclaimed happily. Mina had changed since the first day. She talked less serious and even made jokes anywhere she could. That's not true, raccoon eyes, Katsuki yelled back at her. I never said that, you little, Katsuki continued, and they started casually yelling at each other. Izuku couldn't hold back a chuckle and turned his head back in front of him. He locked eyes with red ones like Kaken's, but not with the same fire. Izuku approached him with a smile. Hi Kirishima, he said while trying to make him return the smile. Which he didn't, he just kept looking at Izuku's hips and legs. The green-haired man then realized how exposed he was and quickly said, sorry, 98, what are you looking at, shitty hair? Katsuki said, pushing Mina aside with an angry frown. He then walked over and put his arm around Deku's waist. You look amazing, Deku, he said with a condescending smirk in Deku's ear and looked back at Kirishima, not making it disappear. Yeah, Izuku, you look fantastic, Mina said while reappearing after the blonde's back. Kirishima still had his mouth sealed, probably not to provoke the blonde. 19, thank you, Izuku now said, with the red of Katsuki's eyes watching him, coloring his freckled cheeks. People hadn't called him pretty in years and it made his eyes glassy. I gotta go to the bathroom, Izuku said while looking at his feet, and then left the three alone. 15-4 Izuku looked at himself in the mirror while wiping the few tears away. I should really tell her not to make such exposing dresses anymore, he said to himself while turning to see the back. Then someone came out of one of the stalls and Deku froze. He shouldn't be talking to himself so loud. He could almost face bump himself. Plus, oh, hello, Izuku turned around and froze as his smile that had been on his face the whole day disappeared at the sight of the man in front of him. 10, didn't think I would see you here, Shigaraki said with his usual creepy smile. Izuku gulped. All the voices in his head that had been cheering him on the whole day disappeared and left him speechless. He wanted to cry because it felt like he was back to square one from the 10 steps he had taken these few days away from him. He swallowed, pushing tears back, knowing he was trained not to cry in front of the gray-blue-haired man. 93, I didn't think I'd see you here, 𝗧𝗓. But Izuku couldn't finish as he realized how the man looked down at his thighs and hips. He tried pulling his skirt lower when the man started approaching him. 38, wow, you really dressed up, Shigaraki said while his hand made its way down Izuku's bare back to inside the dress. The green-haired man wanted to scream but didn't trust his voice. That, all just for me, he said with his pale face and scarred red eye narrowing the gap to Izuku's face. Was he going to kiss him? Izuku tried pulling away, but the man already pushed a hand behind Izuku's face. 81 Izuku did what he could do best. He closed his eyes and tried thinking about good things, so that later he could act like this never happened. He never went to the bathroom and never saw the man. He tried really hard, but could still feel the breath of the other man on his face and couldn't stop thinking about the lips that would soon touch him. He tried as hard as he could, but they never came. Instead, the man's lips started moving to yell at the shivering man in his grip. 21, what's that? He said, yelling in Izuku's ear. So loud the green-haired man thought he could have turned deaf. Izuku opened his eyes slightly as he realized the man waited for answer. Wow? He asked with a trembling voice, noticing the man still had his arms wrapped around his body holding him tight. This, 𝗬𝗵𝗲 brat, he shouted in Izuku's ear again and pointed aggressively with a long fingernail at the bite mark on Izuku's neck. The man was trembling from anger and started blinking to check if what he saw was real. When he realized it was, he started pulling Izuku's sleeves angrily. 47 The green-haired man had his eyes closed again and tightened every muscle in his body. He shivered as the air, that seemed way colder than it had been, hit his bare skin, revealing all the hickeys and bite marks a blonde with a short temper had left on his body. Shigaraki looked at him in disgust, like Izuku was his property and it had lost all its worth. After a few minutes of Shigaraki losing his mind staring at the shivering greenette in his arms, he pulled Izuku's dress back up. 29, put your demon dress back on, you f-slot. He screamed and pulled Izuku by his hair outside of the bathroom. Izuku whined and tried yelling for Kaken, but the music was too loud. It seemed like the man who was pulling him knew the club pretty well as he passed people and took Izuku to a hall behind the bar. 31 Did Shigaraki know the people that owned this club? Kaken. Izuku screamed at the top of his lungs, while the man kept pulling his hair. You need to shut your demon mouth, you filthy brat, he screamed and pulled further at Izuku's hair. No, just let me 𝗔𝗂𝘁𝗵𝗆. Izuku started screaming but was cut off by a hand hitting his face. Did Shigaraki just slap him? He grabbed the burning cheek and couldn't hold it in anymore. Tears streamed down his face as the door to the club went out of sight, because the angry man turned a corner. Where was he bringing Izuku? That was the question he would get soon an answer to. 15. Give me some of that, Shigaraki screamed frustrated. Izuku tried turning his head, but could only vaguely see some people's shadows, before a cloth was slapped in front of his mouth and everything went black. 57-1, Izuku's gone pretty long, Kirishima said a bit concerned at Mina. It's been more than 10 minutes, he continued while letting go of Mina's hips. He stopped dancing and looked at Bakugo, who was sitting at one of the bars. Hey, Bakugo, shouldn't you check on Midoriya? The blonde turned his face to him and just shrugged. 2. The nerd's fine, he claimed and took a sip of his drink. He wasn't really worried. Deku was probably having a nervous breakdown in the bathroom like when they were younger, he thought. The blonde would always act like people didn't notice when Izuku asked afterwards and cover for the greenette when people asked questions. Katsuki was right but had no idea how wrong he was at the same time. 52. I'm going to go check on him, Kirishima yelled while walking to the bathrooms. 3. Come back here, shitty hair, Katsuki yelled while pushing his glass on the table, causing the vodka to spill. Kirishima turned around confused. I'm going to go look for him, he shouted while already pushing a relieved Kirishima to the side. 1. The blonde pushed all the stupid dancing and drinking people to the side. He was so angry he was ready to explode, but that quickly changed when he saw an empty bathroom and all empty stalls. He ran as fast as he could again, pushing the stupid extras aside to the redhead and his girlfriend. Deku's not in there, he yelled out, worried as soon as he saw them. Their faces started wearing a shocked expression. Do you think he maybe left you, Kirishima said doubtingly, not trying to provoke the blonde who seemed to be worried for the first time. That nerd wouldn't leave me, he quickly interrupted the redhead. Kirishima didn't know what he was talking about. He knew Deku. Deku wouldn't just leave. He never does, even if Katsuki told him to. He knew something was wrong and had a really bad feeling the man in the basement had something to do with this. 42-1 Kaken. Izuku said while blinking at a hazy figure in front of him. Guess you've mistaken me for someone, Aizu. Izuku knew the nickname didn't mean much good, but to his surprise it wasn't Shigaraki's voice but a female one. He blinked a few more times to see a girl in a uniform with blonde hair in 2 knots. He had never seen her before. 67. Who are you? Izuku stuttered, noticing the knife in her hand. He couldn't move. He was binded by ropes to what seemed like a pillar. Where was he? Where did Shigaraki go? 12. Did the filthy slut wake up? A voice said from behind him. He couldn't see who it was, but didn't need to. Hey, I was just talking to him, the girl in front of him said in a sad tone. She made an angry frown and put her knife in the air, making Izuku wince. Are you trying to come between us? She yelled, ready to attack. Don't worry, Toga, you can have that brat, Shigaraki said now where Izuku could see him. I don't want him anymore. He spoke with a disgusted face. Izuku looked down to the floor. He was ashamed, but why? He knew he shouldn't be. 15. Why? Toga asked with a frown. He's so cute. She came closer to Izuku, cupping his freckled cheek, and so good to stab, she continued, now putting the knife at Izuku's throat. 35. Stop it, Toga, we can't kill him, another man warned, sounding from behind Izuku. He proceeded to pull away the girl's arm. With the knife. The man looked at Izuku with no expression. It reminded Izuku of Todoroki. Yet, he said while cocking his head to the side, making a horrifying face. Izuku thought, terrified. His neon blue eyes seemed to burn through Izuku's like Kaken's did, but with blue fire. 101. Someone has told Tamura you know Bakugo. Another man said. Izuku couldn't see the man. He was in a sort of costume. Is that true? When Izuku didn't answer, he started yelling, tell me, and immediately continued in a softer voice. Take your time, dear. Izuku's eyes widened at that. This man was definitely not in the right state of mind. 38. Of course he knows him, Shigaraki answered for Izuku. He then approached the sitting Izuku while saying, I didn't want to pull you into this mess. he explained. Even after I knew you had gone to Bakuga's mansion, you just meant too much to me, he cooed further. Then when he crouched down to Izuku and grabbed his face aggressively, he said, "But then you betrayed me." A tear made its way down Izuku's face and landed on the pale hand of the man. With that 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗪𝗐 of all people, he pushed Izuku's cheeks in his teeth, making even more tears fall down. "I knew he had a thing for you, but I trusted you." He let go of the binded man's cheeks and threw his head to the side, making it hit the pillar and the man pass out. "For what?" Shigaraki screamed out angrily at the man who was leaning to the side with a bleeding head. "For what?" he repeated in a more silent tone while already walking to the door. 39. "You filthy were," he said, disgusted, and closed the door with the other people behind him who were already leaving. "I want that color," Katsuki said, pointing at a jade green piece of paper. In combination with the orange light we picked out yesterday, the 15-year-old boy was choosing his colors for his room inside his father's new mansion. 11. "It's because it makes you think of Izuku, isn't it?" his mother said with a teasing wink. Katsuki startled and hid his blush. 3. "No, what the F are you thinking?" he growled, and when his mom didn't seem convinced, he quickly pointed at a darker green. "I meant this one." Mitsuki cocked her head doubtingly at her son. "It'll be better with the orange anyways," he said while heading for the door. 2. "Okay, Katsuki," she yelled after him. "He's so stubborn," she thought to herself with a light chuckle and shaking her head. "Old hag always with her crazy assumptions," the blonde growled to himself. Although deep down he knew she was right. His father had told him that someday he had to drop out of school to start taking his place. The blonde had no problem with that, but what Masaru followed with not so. "It's going to be dangerous, so you'll have to cut all connections to your school." Katsuki's eyes widened. He had known since he was 6 he was going to take his dad's place, but that he had to do all of this too took all the words out of his mouth. "But," the shocked 14-year-old boy started while holding some tears back. 16. "We already made a plan," Masaru continued unbothered. "You'll be going to a high school far from here and then drop out when you're ready." Katsuki couldn't help the tears making their way down his face. "Stop crying, Katsuki. It's what you do to honor your family," Masaru said without changing his expression. The boss was always very calm, which made him even scarier. The boy quickly pushed his tears back. "You don't cry in front of the boss, that's weak," he thought to himself, and just nodded. "You can leave now," Masaru spoke, but it sounded like an order. Katsuki left with head up and shoulders down like he was taught. 12. The blonde had walked through the corridors like nothing was wrong, so no one had noticed when the blonde had broken down at night and had cried himself to sleep. 2 to 5. "Tell me where they took him," Katsuki yelled after breaking down the iron door to the basement. He took the top of 𝗵𝗃𝗏's shirt and shook the man's head till he finally answered. 12. "You're gonna have to be a little more specific than that, Katsuki," he said in a cocky tone. The blonde didn't even bother to correct him on the use of his first name like he had done the past year. "You know where your people are hiding, so tell me." He yelled in the man's face. "They took something from me." He tried sounding threatening, but there was a tremble in his voice. "That sounds bad," 𝗷 continued in his teasing tone, which made Katsuki even more angry. 3. "How do they know Deku?" Katsuki said, looking away from the man, hiding the tears welling up in his eyes. "Oh, that green-haired boy." 𝗷 said, now a little more serious, like he was waiting for Katsuki to put the pieces together, but decided to help him. "Tamura took quite a liking to him after he found out he was one of your old friends." Katsuki turned his head back to the man in disbelief. "I have been waiting for you to find out," 𝗷 said while looking the blonde right in the eye. 28. "Shut up," Katsuki said, whispering, still not believing what he was hearing. This couldn't be true. "What are they going to do to him?" he asked while pulling his own hair, panicking, not really thinking the man would answer. "Why do you always ask yourself that?" he answered with a nasty question. "When you clearly already know the answer." Katsuki's heart stopped. "No, it couldn't be like that. When you love them," 𝗷 stopped for a few seconds, "they die." 47. "No, shut up," Katsuki said while tears now streamed his face, merciless. 2. "Like her, right?" 𝗷 continued, calm at the crying man. "Or do you really still believe she's alive?" The blonde didn't answer that question, so 𝗷 answered himself. "That must be why you're still keeping me here after almost a year." 26. "Shut up." Katsuki yelled while placing his hands on his ears to block the man's talking. One? Oh yeah, and him too, right? All for one continued, enjoying the clear pain he was causing the blonde. But I don't think I need to remind you of all people. Katsuki could still hear him and fell down on his knees. I mean, you're the reason he's dead. Katsuki opened his eyes, which he had shut a long time ago due to the stinging tears. 9. The truth he hadn't wanted to face for a long time, but he knew all for one was right. He wanted to change everything, to the moment it all started. Katsuki Bakugo's biggest regret? 2. I know you killed those 2 people, said a 17-year-old Katsuki confident while holding a gun at a way larger man who seemed to have muscles like a beast. The parents of that kid, he continued knowing the man was unarmed. I don't know what you're talking about, the man tried, but seemed scared for what was about to come. The prosthesis in your eye says something different, Katsuki said in an angry tone. He hated when people lied. My father warned me not to involve in other families' business, Katsuki continued knowing he had the right man, but I just can't let you live a normal life after taking 2, he said and pulled the trigger. 8. Bang 5. The murderer who went by the name Muscular fell to the ground with blood gushing out of his head. Katsuki quickly left the scene and started running back to his mansion. His father had just given it to him and he now called the shots. He had done something good tonight, he had stopped a killer. Although later he would regret it, wishing he never involved in that family's business like his father had warned. 6-1, we'll find him, Kirishima tried reassuring the blonde while putting a hand on his shoulder. Katsuki had left the basement like nothing happened, but the red swollen skin around his eyes said different. Yeah, shitty hair, he said while pushing the hand away. Kirishima had already sent some guards to search the bar and the area around it, but they hadn't found anything. Katsuki hoped the greenette was okay when he made himself ready to go searching himself. He wasn't going to let Deku end like his parents, not because of his fault. 17-2. Izuku opened his eyes and shut them pretty quickly, realizing his head was spinning and his painful headache. He couldn't reach up to feel the blood on his wound, but when he moved his face he felt the dried up blood immobilizing it a little. What was he supposed to do? He tried pulling at the ropes but he couldn't move himself out of them. When his vision went clearer he saw the blonde girl in front of him, and she immediately started yelling, making Izuku flinch. Tamura, he's awake. Had she been standing there the whole time he was out? Izuku didn't know, but the idea terrified him. The door behind him opened and Shigaraki crouched down next to the pillar, looking with a worried face at Izuku. Are you uncomfortable? A shiver went down Izuku's spine. I might have overreacted a little yesterday, he cooed, further pinching Izuku's freckled cheek. But that doesn't mean I forgive you, he said while hardening his grip, making Izuku yelp. 4. We should move, Bakugo is gonna search this bar, the man with the bright blue eyes said. Right? Tamura said, letting go of his cheek and showing off a creepy smile. Let's get moving, Shigaraki said when pulling at the ropes. Izuku looked at him in disbelief and tears started welling up in his eyes. If he went to a different place Katsuki would never find him and he couldn't escape in this shape. His head was still foggy and every muscle seemed to hurt. Stand up, brat, Shigaraki demanded, but when Izuku moved his sore but made him wince in pain. More tears started streaming down his face. Dabi, carry him. 82. The man who reminded him of Todoroki pulled his arms around Izuku's waist and pulled him up. He was pressed against the scarred man's chest with piercings and he winced at every step the man took. Where were they taking him? Kaken was never going to find him like this. Izuku broke down in tears in the man's chest, making the man look down and hesitate, but eventually he walked further to their unknown destination.